We have been witnessing a great deal of violence on our streets as a result of Marxist organizations using the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis as an excuse to destroy sections of their cities. Increasingly, we are witnessing groups coming together as militia, advocating the Black Lives Matter mantra, but are in reality communist-led terrorists. In response, we are beginning to see the so-called opposition forming militias of white citizens to combat the other groups. This is a very dangerous mix. You have to ask yourself the question as to how these people are organizing on both sides. Who starts them? How do they recruit? How do they communicate? And what is their purpose? If you don't know, then perhaps it's part of a conspiracy. Their purpose is to create chaos, and with it, the demand for law and order at any price, particularly the phasing out of local police into a national police. And it doesn't matter which side is shooting, the result will be the same. One of the catalysts for chaos will be the election this fall. It is already being set up for mayhem as a result of the manner in which the elections are being structured with mail-in balloting. With the excuse of the pandemic, more and more areas, particularly those controlled by Democratic administrations, are pushing mail-in voting. Believe me, voter fraud is already a serious problem around the country, and this will make this problem look like child's play. Voting is already marred by defranchised voters, administrative errors, and litigation. As to litigation, the upcoming election will be fraught with litigation. We predict it will be the most litigious election in the history of the country. We may not know the outcome of many elections around the country for weeks. As to the election for president, the media and leftists around the country are setting the stage for doubts as to Trump's reelection being legitimate, no matter what the outcome. We believe that there will possibly be widespread violence if Trump is reelected. There will be protests and more violence as a result, because they're spreading doubt as to the result of the election, no matter what. The only partial solution to this dilemma is to work to have your elections be done in person, at the polls, not by mail. For one thing, there are too many instances of ballots being found weeks after the election in post offices. The Postmaster General has already stated that if a postman have trouble delivering mail because of an overload, then put it aside and deliver it on another day. The problem with this is that there are deadlines attached to mail-in ballots. What if these ballots are set aside and they do not get the election to the election officials in time? In addition, mail-in ballots are being rejected by election officials at a rate anywhere from 1% to as much as 20%. They do not reject balloting at the physical polling places. Democrats have already launched lawsuits in nearly 20 states over election procedures and have already been successful altering election procedures and districts in their favor. The excuse for mailing in ballots is due to the pandemic. They do not want people going to the polls. The pandemic is also being used to ensure that the people do not organize in their local communities to change their Marxist governments. There is no recall movement that is gaining traction to get rid of a local leftist official due to the edicts the local governments have imposed on the people. They cannot gather in groups large enough to have successful organization to put together a recall movement. For instance, they cannot gather signatures on such a petition without wearing a face mask. Can you imagine the problems that would ensue if you were to go door to door gathering signatures wearing a face mask? How do you think you would be greeted at the door or on the street? Hey, honey, there's a man at the door and he's wearing a face mask. You better duck. Lots of luck getting it done that way. They've placed us in a position of not being able to oppose them enough to get them out of office. We believe that a lot of pandemic rules will be lifted after the election because they're being imposed to skew the election through mail-in balloting. The real reason they are imposing more restrictions is to set us up for voter fraud. Once this need is over, the restrictions will be lifted. If enough people understand what's going on and have their eyes on their local election officials, then much of the problems that can happen won't. Crooks don't like exposure and move a lot slower, for one thing, in their criminal activity, and will do the right thing if they feel that they're under very close scrutiny. So, Do all you can to inform others as to the dangers of mail-in voting. Also, the entire American system of voting is under attack, especially the Electoral College, the most ingenious thing our founders did to ensure really fair elections. Inform yourself on this issue as well by sending for our booklet on What is the Electoral College from shopjbs.org.